Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Deeksha Pandey, Additional Professor in the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, KMC Manipal, and I'm also the in charge of Subdivision of Urogynecology in our department. Today I have with me Dr. Suma, who will be presenting a very interesting case of stress urinary incontinence, her history, examination, and also the management and follow-up part of it. So what we thought that this month, which is October month, will make it as the month of stress urinary incontinence, because recently last week or in last 10 days we had 5 cases of stress urinary incontinence with different combinations with other pathologies. So one by one we'll be discussing all these, and in between we'll be posting some interesting SUI surgeries also. So keep watching. And to start with, let me tell you before only it is a disclaimer that this is not a very simple case of stress urinary incontinence which we are going to present today, but let's learn. There are so many learning points in this case that let's start discussing. So Sima, go ahead.
Today I am presenting a case of Mrs. X, a 45-year-old, hailing from Chitradurga, belonging to a lower socioeconomic status, a homemaker by occupation. She has complaints of urinary leak since 1 year. That is, complaint of stress urinary incontinence since the past 1 year, which was insidious in onset. Initially, it was present only on cuffing, but gradually progressed to leak even during standing from sitting, that is, change in posture. And there was increase in intensity. Initially, it was just dribble of urine, but now it had become a streamline, so high that she has to use diapers for the same. She was treated for UTI with norfloxacin, and apart from that, she was not given any other pelvic floor muscle training or other conservative methods of SUI. But she has no associated complaints of low backache, abdominal pain, burning micturition, fever, or no complaints of mass descending per vaginum or any vulval itching. She has no complaints of increase in frequency of micturition or nocturia. There were no complaints of hesitancy, urgency, or narrow stream of urine or a post-voidal urge. There was no complaints of loss of appetite, loss of weight as well. Past history: she had undergone hysterectomy at the age of, in 2006, and there was no complaints of any post-surgery bleeding. She is married for 28 years. She is para 2, living 2, both vaginal deliveries, and last childbirth was 23 years back. She is a case of chronic hypertension since 2 years, but she has no other history of chronic cough, TB, bronchitis, or any asthma. She has undergone, like we discussed before, she has undergone TAH in 2006 for severe spasmodic dysmenorrhea, and also she has undergone appendectomy in the same setting. She consumes a mixed diet. Her bowel habits were normal, and she has a normal sleep and appetite pattern.
So we'll stop here. So this is the history part of
Yes.
it. So to summarize, she is how old
She's
is she?
45 years old.
45 years old, and 2006 her
Yes.
hysterectomy was done. That is how many years ago from today?
15
years ago, when she was
It was around 30 years
30
of age.
years ago, when she was 30 years of age, too young for spasmodic dysmenorrhea.
Yes.
That is the only concern. She has already undergone a hysterectomy surgery, and now for last 1 year,
Yes, ma'am.
these problems are only for 1 year.
Yes, ma'am.
And Suma, you also told me that initially it was with cough,
Yes.
but now it is even with
Change
change
posture.
of posture. Then you told, why do you want to tell this? Usually, do we ask all these questions? I'm happy that you have asked. That has a significance. But for our viewers, can you tell what is the significance?
It is gradually progressing in nature. Before, it was not that uncomfortable that it did not disrupt her way of quality of life. But now, even with change of posture, she has to go and change her inner garments, or she has to go out with diapers inside.
So
it
maybe
is
the
affecting.
quantity of leak has
Has
increased. And the other thing, what I want to actually, we are working on this kind of one score because we do not have, till now, we do not have a severity scoring for SUI. Okay, but it disables, progressively disables the lady. That's what you want to say. But what happens? So in that scoring system, what we are doing, the paper is still undergoing some work and statistical analysis. So what happens actually, initially the patient will have, with very much, whenever the urethra starts becoming lax or incompetent, that time a lot of intra-abdominal pressure is required for leaking, like in jumping, coughing, all those activities. But if it progressive, this sphincter keeps on getting more and more incompetent, or in layman terminology, loose, then even little increase in intra-abdominal pressure also might cause this kind of leak. So it actually, what you told is a very important point, that it showed within 1 year the problem has progressed a lot. Okay, and maybe you are intelligent to ask this question, or maybe patient is intelligent to tell you that initially she said that it was only in form of drops or dribbling. Now it is in the form of a stream, jet or a stream. That means the problem has, and her disability related to that has really increased over a course of just
1 year.
1 year. Okay.
Coming to examination part, she was conscious, coherent, cooperative, and is comfortable in sitting and lying down posture. Her general condition was fair. There was no pallor, icterus, or any period edema. Her spine and gait appeared normal. Breast and thyroid appeared clinically normal. She had a pulse rate of 80 beats per minute, blood pressure of 120 by 80 millimeters of mercury. CVS and RS examination was normal, and per abdomen, it was soft and non-tender. There was no mass or any organomegaly. Phalansteal and laparotomy scars were well healed. Per speculum, vault was healthy, and on full bladder examination, we have performed universal cough stress test, and we have noted a stream of urine all 4 times. It was minimal rectocele, but no evidence of any cystocele or vault prolapse. So we have diagnosed it as a case of a severe stress urinary incontinence.
So I want Suma you to repeat. You said that you did a test which is called universal cough stress test. This is one of the very important tests in a case of stress urinary incontinence. So can you tell, this is the only test which is important to do clinically when a patient complains that she has incontinence with increase in intra-abdominal pressure related activities. So can you explain in detail?
Universal cough stress test, we ask the patient to lie in dorsal position with knees flexed, and we ask her beforehand not to void her bladder. So this test has to be performed on a full bladder.
Full bladder means, should it be too full?
No. Just it should be full enough that she has to get the urge, but she
Yes.
should not pass urine at that time itself.
Yes.
Not so full that even if it is full bladder, normal people also will have some urinary
Yes.
incontinence. So it should be a minimal first urge time. We have to examine the patient in dorsal position, and we ask the patient to cough just 4 times. Too much coughing also can cause increased abdominal pressure. Then minimal SUI might be noted anyway. So first we have to ask her to cough 4 times only. And with that, we have to note whether there is a stream of urine or whether there is just a dribble all 4 times or just once.
Yes. Okay. So that is what we are working on
To stratify
the problem. But usually universal cough stress says that presence or absence. Universal cough, it's uniform cough stress test. It doesn't say, it is called uniform cough stress test. It doesn't say that whether it is how severe it is. That's what we are working on. It just says whether you can say that present SUI or absent SUI. Okay. So in that you just have to tell the patient, and she coughs and leaks. If you can see the leak of urine from the urethra, then it is confirmatory that patient is having demonstrable SUI.
Yes.
But I hope you know that SUI, even if you cannot demonstrate with the best of your efforts also, if you have done it properly also, and in that particular situation, if you are not able to, still you don't write that patient does not have SUI. Okay, because posture might affect her. SUI, the diagnosis is the complaint. Okay, so as soon as patient says, if you are not able to identify it on examination or establish it on examination, at least send her for physiotherapy, which is the first line management of SUI.
So the limitation of this uniform cough stress test is that it does not grade SUI.
Yes.
It just indicates the presence or absence of it.
Yes.
Okay. In history, she didn't give any history of increased frequency or nocturia or any post-voidal residue or hesitancies, and we have treated her for the same. Most commonly it is due to infection, so we treated urinary tract infection with norfloxacin, and also we have given her pelvic floor muscle training for a period of 3 months, but she didn't report any change in her any improvement in her symptoms. So what we did was we have taken up because it was very severe, like ma'am has already told. All the 4 times it was continuous a jet-like stream. So we thought surgery would be a better alternative to improve our quality of
So
life.
I'll stop you here. If patient comes with a complaint of SUI, we say diagnosis is SUI, we send off for physiotherapy. There is no confusion in that, because physiotherapy, whatever help, it will only help you. There is no side effect of physiotherapy. Okay, the second thing what we have to do, if the patient does not improve or the improvement is minimal, patient is not, because sometimes maybe patient is into some sports or wants to go to gym. For her, that much 10-20% improvement with physiotherapy might not be enough. For the other patient, it might be good enough. So we have to assess it again and discuss the option of surgery. And for surgery, I always teach this thing that when you are doing surgery, I hope you all know that simple case of stress urinary incontinence, when patient complains and you can demonstrate with uniform cough stress test, you do not need to perform any urodynamic studies. Okay, so if history is there, if examination is positive and there are no associated complaints from the patient, you need not do a urodynamic study. So we don't do. So if the patient wants and you have already tried physiotherapy, then you can go ahead with tension-free vaginal tape. That's what actually we did with this patient. Okay.
We have done a basic pre-op investigations. She
But
was
we
not a
operated.
diabetic, and her body mass index was also normal. So we have taken her up for TVT, retropubic approach.
Why retropubic approach? Why we chose her for retropubic approach? Why not obturator approach?
We have retropubic approach has a better outcome as indicated by the quality of life, and it is easy to adjust the tapes as well, per abdominally. And there is also no.
So do you know how do we choose patients? See, when a patient comes to us, we have to choose whether we want to put tape with obturator approach or retropubic approach. So we have only two criteria. One, this patient had severe SUI. So severe SUI, for a case of severe SUI, retropubic approach is better, because the
sling will be just beneath the
it will be snugging the urethra. It covers around 3/8 of circle in retropubic approach, or only 2/8 of circle in obturator approach. So this is a better thing if the patient is having severe. And we have seen, and I don't know if you are practicing these slings and putting obturator. So many people I have spoken to, so many doctors who are practicing, they say that some patient, the improvement won't be 100% if you put tension-free vaginal tape, obturator approach. And maybe those are the cases who were from initially only having severe stress urinary. So when we choose our patient, we have only two criteria. One is the severity. Second is obesity. And why obesity? Because if you have been operating and doing TVTO, you will realize that they have a prefixed size of needle. Sometimes when the patient is very obese, it is very difficult to negotiate the groin area into the obturator membrane and come through the vagina if the patient is obese with that standard size of needle or helix which we pass while doing a tension-free vaginal tape obturator approach. While we do not have such limitation when we are using retropubic approach because of the shape of the needles. Okay. So again, I'll repeat two criteria. If the person is obese, we give her the option of TVT, retropubic approach. And second, if the patient is having severe urinary incontinence, and this is the reason that why we need to stratify. We should have a system where we can stratify these patient treatments.
So since patient was lean, but her SUI was very severe, so we have offered her retropubic approach of TVT, and the surgery was quite uneventful as well. During the procedure also, we have demonstrated a severe SUI with retrograde bladder filling, and post-procedure there was no SUI. We have stopped it just enough to let the urine pass normally, but not enough to tighten the urethral neck
Too
itself.
much.
And post-op day 1, like usual.
So we'll explain it. What you said is okay. So usually this surgery we do under which anesthesia?
Spinal anesthesia.
Why spinal anesthesia? So
because patient will have to be awake and she has to cough when we request.
Yes.
Demonstration.
So demonstration we have to do, and tape we have to adjust so much so that 2 drops of urine leak. Okay. Why we want 2 drops of urine leak? Because when the patient
When the patient resumes normal activity, that mesh
After
will
that
tighten.
anesthesia, when the effect of spinal anesthesia wears off, then muscles get little activity. So to compensate, they should not, because if you make it too tight, that there is zero drop which is leaking, absolutely dry, and spinal anesthesia effects weans off, then what will happen? Muscles also will start acting, and then patient might go into retention. So the dictum is, when you are checking after adjusting the tape and you tell the patient to cough and she's under spinal anesthesia, she should be able to leak true drops of urine. That's the perfect adjustment.
Okay. So,
Post-
intra-op, it was uneventful. And post-op day 1, as per usual protocol, we've removed the catheter and we've asked the patient to void every 2 hours. But she has reported that patient hasn't passed urine for around 4 to 5 hours.
So she was not able to pass urine. But one important thing, she was not having urgency also. She was not having a feeling of retention or pain or desire to pass urine. Okay.
So what we did was, we thought it was post-operative spasm, post-operative complication. So we just tried to drain urine that day. Intermittently we kept draining.
So
but
maybe this is little tough part for you. I'll tell the story from here. Okay. So what happened? That post-operative day 1, we removed the catheter. We remove the catheter and tell the patient to pass urine. For one day, we do not intervene. We tell her to normally as she wants to pass urine, and tell how she is doing. Then that day in the afternoon time, when we asked her, she said that she has not passed urine for 4 to 5 hours, and she's not able to. She's not feeling also. We sent her forcefully to the toilet, and she said that she is not able. She passed a little bit, but she was not able to empty her bladder completely. So this can be one of the complications. Maybe we thought that maybe the tape is little tight. So we checked the residual urine by ultrasound. And ultrasound, there was around like 1.5 liters of urine inside the bladder. And surprisingly, patient was not feeling any urge with this. What is the normal bladder capacity? 500 ml. In 500, 600 ml, we should have a urge, strong urge to pass urine, but she was not having that. So that was one first warning sign or red alert. What we got. Anyway, we loosened the tape little bit. There was no leak on coughing. We tried it many times. That part was settled, but now patient was having retention. So we had to do something. We loosened the tape. Actually, 2 times, considerably. But still, whatever we did, she was having like 200 to like 210 ml of urine every time, even after loosening the tape. Then it should not happen. What is the normal volume of residual acceptable? 100 ml. 100 ml is acceptable. Best is if it is up to 50 ml. Okay. So what we did. So we went back into her records, that where we went, and we started taking the history in more detail to the patient. And then patient told one thing, that sometimes pre-operatively also, or before reporting to us also, patient used to have a complaint, very typical complaint. She told that during the night sometime she will not feel like passing urine, and full night and after 10-12 hours, then she will have urge, and that time she will feel that she is not able to empty her bladder properly. And then we asked one more thing, that how much volume of urine she was voiding every time, because the frequency was less. Okay, she was not going to pass urine every 3-4 hours. Sometimes entire day, entire evening she was not going to pass urine. And then she said that she is able to pass urine around 1 liter or more than that. Too much urine she used to pass. Okay, and she was not a diabetic patient also. Okay, then we went. I started, like, we together started revising her file, and then we saw this urodynamic which she has undergone a few months ago. Not urodynamic, not the cystometry part, but just the uroflowmetry part. There were some important things, and let me tell you once here, Suma, before we take the patient up for surgery, we always check for residual urine in the bladder. And we had recorded it 2 to 3 times, once by urologist and once or twice by us also, that there was hardly any post-void residual urine in her bladder. Okay, so then when we saw that uroflowmetry, how should be the normal flow of uroflowmetry?
It should be a bell curve with flow rate on the y-axis and flow time on the x-axis.
So it should be smooth bell-shaped curve. That's it.
Hmm.
That's what you have to remember.
Yes.
Patient should pass urine, it should go up, pressure should go up and come down.
Hmm.
Okay. But what happened in this case?
It was a biphasic curve.
Biphasic curve. So there were two phases like this.
Two peaks.
And two peaks also, the pressure was too high.
Hmm.
Now, if we would have seen this before, maybe we would have asked for urodynamic studies.
Complete.
And while she was emptying her bladder, we could have seen the intra-abdominal pressure. So what it looks like, when these peaks are very high, these patients are known as supervoiders, okay? That they are putting too much pressure in their abdominal muscles in an effort to try to empty. Why they are putting so much? Usually what happens when anybody passes urine, abdomen doesn't work. What works? Detrusor muscle only works and sphincter opens. Here what these patients do, because their detrusor is not working properly, they try to put compression, they try to compensate from their abdominal muscles. They put too much pressure, and she was putting too much pressure. But there was no problem because her sphincter also was relaxed. So the bladder was hypoactive and sphincter was relaxed. So this patient actually did not have a single problem. It was a complex problem of bladder, of detrusor muscle, as well as the sphincter or the urethra. Okay. So, and then when we saw at the end of this, we saw the voided volume of the patient. The voided volume after this test also at the end was 1,200 and something. 1.3 liters, which is too much beyond the normal capacity. So what I want to see, all of us will do some mistakes and we learn till our patient, we can manage the patient properly. So this is acceptable, and we keep a watch next time, and we teach each other from our mistakes. That is important. So anyway, her incontinence we treated. And then so she was having a problem which is called hypoactive bladder, or the newer name for this problem is underactive bladder. And let me tell you, this is a very new concept. It's not that we are realizing now. Overactive bladder is known terminology for decades, but underactive bladder is just, we have come to know, like this has become a recognized entity only from the year 2014 or 15. So for 4, 5, 6 years only, we have actually understood that there is this kind of problem also. So I'm planning to do a lecture on underactive bladder also soon, but maybe that we'll do it next month sometime. So this patient had now finally two problems. One problem was
underactive bladder with compensatory stress urinary incontinence.
It was not compensatory. Her urethra was, it was associated complaint. Her sphincter was lax. Okay. So she had two complaints. One was underactive bladder and the other was lax urethra. Why I am saying that? Because it was not that she was able to, she was having this stress incontinence when the bladder was 1 liter or 2 liters fully. Okay, she was having with minimal, when we demonstrated also in OT, with just filling of 200 ml of urine also. When she coughed, there was a lot of leak. So this patient had actually underactive bladder as well as sphincter deficiency or stress urinary incontinence. For the management of stress urinary incontinence, we have already put a tape which is taking care of that. And what are we doing, Suma, for her
underactive bladder? We have asked her for a bladder training exercise, and we have also started her on methylene coil.
So two things are important. What is so three things? Maybe third one is the medical management. First is pelvic floor muscle training. We have taught, and we have taught her some abdominal, like not we, our physiotherapist. So how she can effectively use her abdominal pressures to empty her bladder. The second, and maybe more important physiotherapy, is bladder drill. So what is a bladder drill?
In 2 to 3 hours, she has to voluntarily go and pass urine and record the volume of how much she has voided. That bladder diary she has to...
No, bladder diary is before. So maybe one more thing which we can tell, which is actually a very important thing for... So there are two different things. One is bladder diary and other thing is bladder drill. Bladder diary is used for diagnosis. Bladder drill is for therapy. So bladder diary actually we should do for every patient whosoever comes with urinary complaints. We tell them to maintain 3 days bladder diary. But we started initially in our clinic, but what started happening, there was so much language issue. And like our patient, every patient whom we are seeing, many of them are laborers and they are not educated. for them to get a correct value was getting very difficult. So because of practical issues, we are not able to do this. But in populations where you are getting those patients who can understand the importance, who have time to fill that bladder diary, we can do that. It is a very effective, because that time she would have told that so much urine she is voiding. So we would have got an idea. But in India, in our kind of population, maybe for every patient of urogynecology, because of her age, economic status, her work status, what occupation she is into, how hard, difficult it is, her daily routine, and her understanding level and education level also, we are not able to follow it with every patient. Okay, and there are some language barriers also, definitely, because Kannada difficult for us to understand and difficult for her to write in English. So there are some barriers, some challenges in doing that. But bladder diary in those populations that it can be implemented is a very good 3-day bladder diary. So don't confuse. Bladder diary is for diagnosis. Bladder drill is you train the bladder the way you train a baby's bladder. You think you have to first unlearn things and then you. So what do we do in bladder training? It is divided into 4 weeks, this training. Okay. So first 1 week we tell her to pass urine every hour. Okay. Whether she is having the urge or not having the urge, she has to go to the loo and empty her bladder. In between, if she is having incontinence, let it be. In between, if she is having urge, let it be. That's the training. Okay. Next week, we tell her to pass every 2 hours. We increase the duration. She has to hold the urine for 2 hours and pass every 2 hours. Then next third week will be 3 hours. Then fourth week is 4 hours. Then she can continue this. Then she gets into this habit and bladder is trained accordingly. And then she can follow this every 3 to 4 hours. If a patient is voiding, that's well within normal limits. And actually, we should not hold too much urine also in our bladder. That's not a good practice. We have to teach our patients. Okay. So the patient is fine now?
Yes, ma'am.
Has she gone?
Yes, ma'am. She's discharged.
So what are the things you learned from this case? I learned a lot. What all you learned?
Yes, we have to ask, even frequency of micturition, we are more concerned with increased frequency.
Yes.
So we should ask decreased frequency
Very
as well. On the number of times she passes urine and the quantity, how much the volume she voids, that is also equally
Very
important.
good. So I want all of you who are practicing urogynecology or seeing these kind of patients, you should add these 2 points what Suma has told in your history table. Yes.
And
and maybe if she has, like, urodynamics is not for everybody, but if you find this kind of problem where the patient has less frequency of voiding in her history and large volumes, maybe for those women, urodynamics should be planned. Okay. And definitely management. You did not tell, like I forgot to ask you, what is the medical management? We have started her on some medication.
yes, for urinary retention, we have started her on Betamicol,
which increases the activity of
detrusor
muscles. Okay, so these 3 things we have done, and with that, her residual volume was decreasing every time till she was with us. And now we have sent her home. We have called her after 2 months, and she will come and we will reassess her. And I hope she'll be better with her physiotherapy. Anyway, her problem, which she came to us with stress urinary incontinence, severe degree, which she was not able to conduct her day-to-day life, and her quality of life had become so bad, that has been sorted out. I hope with our medical management, bladder training and physiotherapy, all her hypoactive bladder will also become better. A hypoactive bladder will also become, or underactive bladder will also become better, and I hope she comes happy next time. She has gone happy, and I hope everything will be settled. So a lot of learning was in this case, and Suma took care of that patient really well. And thank you, Suma, for the case discussion.